Welcome, friends, to another episode of The Conversation. My guest today is Harry Gibbs, the Assistant Vice President and Manager of Canandaigua National Bank, now in Pittsford, his new assignment. His goal there is to build relationships with individuals and small businesses in the community to help them achieve their financial goals and dreams. Prior to joining the bank in 2015, Harry spent 8 years as a sports broadcaster here in Rochester, primarily with WHAM 1180. Outside of his bank work, he serves on the board of Rochester-area Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He's a member of the Elder Board at the Browncroft Community Church and an all-around good guy. Harry, welcome to The Conversation.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Well, I started this, those who have listened to this podcast in the past, whenever it was, almost 3/4 of a year ago in the coronavirus. That's what started it. And then we've moved on to other subjects over the course of the year. But we're kind of back there. That is to say, here we are almost at the anniversary, in a manner of speaking, of the coronavirus first, having its first case, I think, in January somewhere in the United States. And we're still in the middle of it. And so I kind of wanted to talk about money and talk about, all things coronavirus relative to the work that you do. So let's just start there. What's your, Harry, it's been a year now. I know your bank was involved in the Paycheck Protection Program, otherwise known as the PPP. But what's your general assessment, looking back now a year later of what's called PPP number 1? What went well? What could we have done better overall?
Sure. I think what goes well anytime you stimulate small businesses is you keep them alive. You keep the dream of many individuals going, and they needed that because they were completely and utterly shut down. No income coming in, no opportunity to grow or even make any type of living. So it was vital that we did something for these individuals because there was no insurance policy that they could have paid for that would have helped cover their expenses during this time. I suppose there was good budgeting or, planning for emergencies that they could have done. But outside of that, they needed the help of the government to say, hey, we're sorry. We just got hit with a pandemic. We're going to support you and support your people. And that was the success of it. It certainly kept businesses going that really needed it. And in some cases, it probably really pumped businesses up that still had some ability to work through a pandemic or zig and zag into a different avenue of their business and just be wildly successful last year, as weird as it sounds to say that about 2020, but it is a reality for many. In that space. But then there were some that were, completely crushed, and it gave people jobs, at least for that short period of time, and some hope. And so that was positives that I saw, certainly. Negatives, it was only a short period of time. Like you said, you're talking about the year anniversary, and we need to stimulate again because it's all dried up. That opportunity lost is still being lost in some industries in a very big way, and will, be affected by these winter months harder than others. So it makes you wonder, was there a better option? Was there better foresight that could have occurred as far as saying,
maybe it needed to be bigger.
Maybe it needed to be bigger. Maybe it needed to be rolled out differently. Why did we decide to directly go to the small business owner and say, well, you take care of these people, you take care of your people via this stimulus because it'll be too hard to send everybody to the unemployment line, and, it'll hurt the good vibes of the country if everyone's on the unemployment line. But maybe that was what was required. Maybe that's what would have gotten everybody to seriously lock down, as if, everyone's out of work. But I know these are wild scenarios, but I think it's something we have to think about. It feels as though this could happen again at any moment. It doesn't feel like we're quite vulnerable, but we pray that we learned from this and that the world will adjust appropriately to pandemics and how to react to them, and just plan for them maybe, knowing that these type of events can occur.
So I have heard, I don't know what people know, even listening to us, that much about the PPP, unless you happen to be involved in it. I suppose if your business was involved in it, you know something. And I don't even know from some people I've talked, if they knew everything that there was to know. I mean, you're sort of in an urgent situation. You need money. You want to make payroll. I think payroll was the big idea, right? Paycheck Protection Program. There were certain, criteria. You couldn't use it to build a new, wing to your business. You had to use it for payroll, I think, if I understand it right. But I've heard some criticism, and I don't even know, Harry, that's why I'm sure you do, but certainly better than I, about now here we are. We're sort of in the payback phase, I suppose. And I know your bank was a participant or a one of the places people could go to get one of these loans. And I've heard from some, that are that they need to pay it back. Either they need to pay it back or they have to pay the taxes, and a lot of grumbling. And I don't know if this is just, the typical, noise, or that there are some hidden surprises. What's your sense of, how this is working out for people who've taken the loan? It's benefited them. Is it mostly gravy, or what's the true story about the PPP number one?
No, it's an important discussion to have related to this, because again, this is how we're going to learn moving forward. It was a mess at the beginning. It wasn't well categorized, and there was a lot of confusion as to how much you could apply for, who could apply. It ran out of money within like 10 days. We were fresh out. I could not give you a PPP loan. It did get flushed with cash, and eventually over the summer months weaned off and had money inside of it that I could have given out if someone were to come for a PPP loan in August, let's say, when things didn't seem quite as bad. So as far as the rollout and the forgiveness side now, this is why the new stimulus package, a big portion of it, is occurring to clean up those rushed mistakes from April. So, forgiveness is extremely easy now under the new stimulus laws because they're all retroactive. They're all going back and saying, if you did PPP1 and you did it under these premises, sorry, you can, try to get a little bit more out of PPP1. You can make your forgiveness process a lot simpler as long as you got under a certain dollar threshold, very easy, forgiveness process. And then there is a tax element. These expenses related to payroll that people, take advantage of, writing off to help offset gains within business, that can all occur now. They are certainly making PPP1 as beneficial as possible now retroactively, but it's only because of, the second round of stimulus that's hit us now here in the winter of, 2021. And I'm thankful for it, because there was a lot of angst and frustration with it if they didn't do these things.
So I'm guessing you guys, CNB, are participating in what's happening now, right?
Correct. Yep.
The PPP2. I don't know if there's a name for it. Are the terms different? You just kind of answered that. Are they more or less attractive, or is it really all depend on who you are?
There's certainly a lot of it depends on who you are. They are very attractive. They do require now an element of need. So, earlier in our conversation, I mentioned how businesses that were performing even through pandemic still were allowed to do the PPP, which made them wildly successful during this past year. That won't occur this time around. You would need to show a 25% loss one quarter of 2020 compared to that same quarter of 2019. Now, can you argue it's pretty easy to do? Certainly. It's hard to find a business that can't show, gross receipts loss from the second quarter of 2020. That's that April, May, June timeframe where things were really dark. And a majority of business should be able to show some type of loss, and they would then qualify for this second round. But as far as dollar amounts, we're really flushing money into the restaurant industry. So anyone that's involved in, food, restaurants, will get even more money in PPP this time around. Previously, they got 2.5 times their monthly payroll expenses. This time around, they'll get 3.5 times. So this should bring them into the spring, that true, like what I consider the true 1-year anniversary of the pandemic, which is the 15 days to slow the spread.
So it's interesting. You said something right there I didn't know, which makes sense, that the people planning all of this, I guess the government, has tailored the second round of this loans, or these set of loans, in a sense, to the people who were most affected, which you wouldn't even know. We don't live through pandemics all the time. And what you mentioned, restaurants, small businesses, which is a majority of our economy, but even some that have been mostly hard hit. I guess those who don't have a lot of runway in their financial, in their finances. They typically run with a very short runway, or whatever the right words are. And certainly restaurants are the case. So it sounds, at least in that sense, that there's some specificity that wasn't there before. We're really trying to help the businesses that are most vulnerable. Is that true? Is that your sense?
That is 100% the reaction that they've made here in this second go around. In their defense, they couldn't do it the first time.
That's right.
How could you predict
know?
which industry? I mean, I guess you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to think a pandemic would hurt at a live event, or
right.
Physical occupancy type industries. But outside of that, there's a lot outside of that industry, right? There's a lot of non-physical touch industries that we had no idea how this would affect them.
Now, I know there's so much politics to all this, and that doesn't necessarily have to mean bad or negative, but there's so much politics to it. And even as I understand the figure, just shy of $1 trillion, I guess, is that, and it's perhaps the best we can do, right, with the political situation. But in your opinion, based upon the fact that perhaps there will be more discrimination of whether or not I even want the money, or I'm going to give, who's going to get the money. It's not as open as it was. It wasn't as kind of urgent and crazy as round one was. Is this enough money, or is there going to be another one, or what's your sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no idea. I am certainly fearful of it not being enough, just because I suppose I see those that are most affected and most emotionally tied to this money. I'm literally the person that's responsible for reviewing their documentation and submitting it off to the government for approval, and then funding them. So oddly enough, I just feel like I'm the one giving it to them.
Wow.
Even though our bank is just a facilitator. Like any bank involved in this process is purely just a government facilitator of this stimulus. It just feels different for me, and a lot of people want to know when they can apply and exactly how they need to document their losses, and really focusing in their conversations with me on, I need this money. This is very important. I need you to be, very straightforward with me and let me know that I can do this, because it's going to be a lifesaver for me.
So having lived through this, you're in the banking industry. You are not only in the banking industry, the money industry, but you were part of the distribution of this loan in the middle of the only pandemic you and I have ever lived through. And this is a pretty incredibly unusual, unique situation that we're still living in. What is your best sense of the economy today? That is, January of 2021. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? I don't know if that's the right metaphors over the last year today.
Winners would certainly be anything related to technology,
Okay.
Related to telecommunication, kind of what we're doing here.
Zoom. Yeah.
All that type of that's the thing that's going to continue to be successful after this. there's a lot of things I don't know what comes back. I think of our area specifically, how flush we are with strong real estate and commercial real estate, and will that commercial real estate be needed? How are people going to re-envision their businesses moving forward? What type of risk will they be willing to take to make those choices to buy, buildings and try to fill them with businesses?
Right.
And will those businesses be there to desire that? I really wonder. Certainly, anyone that works from home, it seems like they're very satisfied with what's occurring. It's made life very enjoyable on the personal side. I think they're a lot more involved in their families, whether it's getting kids ready for school. I know there's a big element here in New York of that's not the same, right? That maybe they're only going to school for half the day and they're trying to work from home and also teach from home. So maybe there is a struggle there. But I think for the most part, what I'm hearing from individuals is that's a big positive, the ability to work from home. I don't know if I'm answering your question very well, but I just find that the big winner of all this is we learned how to flex as a society, and as the business world has learned how to flex. And I just wonder their desire to get back to the way it used to be.
Yeah, certainly I've heard, as you just said, that tech's a big winner. I saw, it was an article, this could have been months ago, but it was a graph that talked about some of the segments of the economy, big sections of the economy, the airline industry, maybe the auto industry, other things that we would consider big parts of the economy that were, majorly reduced. And the article was basically saying, in a previous season in our history, that might have dragged the economy down in a major way. In other words, they were very weighty. But you look at the stock market, not that the stock market is the economy, but the stock market had a good year, strangely, in 2020. And what this article was saying was it had on that graph the tech businesses, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Uber, some of these other tech businesses, which actually, to your point of a minute ago, not only did okay, but actually had kind of banner years. So the point of this article was when you add all that up together, the economy did not fantastic, but actually did okay because some of these businesses, the winners, helped the overall economy. So that's just punctuating what you said. The losers, we talked about this a minute ago, is certainly, I would guess, at least the restaurant business. People, even I know in this city here in Rochester, where we live in Rochester, who've opened and closed 2 times, 3 times. People who have put a lot of money investment in these sort of interesting little either delivery systems of food and or having to reconfigure their dining rooms, even create little outside space. That's real money. If you just one restaurant, that's tens of thousands of dollars, and you put all that in there, and then you're shut down. So I would imagine they're losers. Even though I love football, I know you're a sports person, so you love sports, and I'm watching the NFL now, but so I'm sure the NFL is probably okay.
Yeah.
But I do notice, of course, there's people aren't showing up to games. But when you get down below the NFL or whatever sport you are, it's much, much more. Lots of loss. There's people. A lot of these sports have been canceled altogether, or they're much more modest when you get outside of professional sports. And one of my great friends, and someone that's a Rochester-area that we all know, I've spoken with him a number of times, Mark Iacona, the executive director of the Jazz Fest. You talk to him, he'll talk to you about not just the Jazz Fest, but that like the music industry. He's like, is this? They've suffered. No one's talking about that. So the music industry, not only big names, people who you might think they're not going to, Taylor Swift's probably going to survive, but what about the countless people who make money in the music industry, who are names that are not named? When are they coming back? So I would imagine they're considered losers in this economy, and who knows?
Yeah, if you require an audience of any sort or any type of close physical intimacy, it's hard to imagine the way out of this, or when the way out of this will be to a level that you can actually survive. Because I know we all talk about the airlines and the cruise ships and all the vacations we're planning for, but it's going to be a slow reopening of that. It doesn't feel currently, as we have this conversation today, that will kind of be a snap of the finger.
Right.
It'll be a slow grind. And you've not only had to survive the pandemic, now you're going to have to survive the slow grind of slowly reopening, something the restaurants have kind of dealt with in reverse, right? They were flushed with the ability to bring people in, and they were making business and outside here in our area, able to be outside during the summer months. But man, this grind down into the winter has been tough, where they would almost be benefited from being shut down and being able to slash staff and just keep it.
That's right.
As a delivery opportunity only. It's a funny time that these folks are going to enter into and have to survive even out of this. But eventually, I just hope it all does come back, because it is all tied to these things that are so inherently enjoyable, vacations and traveling and things of that nature.
So you said some of this, but when you think now, not only as a banker and someone who's looking at your particular engagement with the economy of 2021, but in general, what's your upbeat, your moderate, your cautious about the economy over the next whole 12 months, and do you think that the economy, you said some of this, hinted at some of this, are we just going to return to a healthy economy? Like, is that our best hope? Or are we going to return to a fundamentally different kind of economy?
I can speak kind of specifically to banking maybe more than anything. Right now, the interest rates, as probably all of our listeners know, are historically low. You've probably refinanced your house or plan on refinancing your house because of these historically low rates. And newsflash, banks make a lot of money off interest rates. And when they are this low, it creates just a margin shortfall or numbers on that margin that are so minute and so small that it takes a lot of lending to really get to a point that makes the bank profitable. So there's just been a huge concentration. I know for myself is, all right, I've done a lot of lending this year, again, most of it through the PPP, but it's on me to capture those individuals as deposit customers and earn their other banking services, because that's where there's another opportunity for the banks to perform is when rates are low, then you certainly want your deposits to be healthy. So that's where I kind of concentrate for me. I don't see the economy recovering anytime, at least in the banking industry, all of 2021, all of 2022. I think you're going to see these historically low interest rates, and you will know things are on the upswing when you see your prime rate on your prime-based lending, that when that number goes up, because it is at the absolute bare minimum floor, you'll know that things are on the uprise. And the nice thing for us is that we have this built-in mechanism within government, the Fed, that talks to us and says on a monthly basis, this is what we see. This is our forecast of what the economy is doing. And right now they're saying, hang on, we're all hands on deck still.
So whether it's pre-COVID or in COVID, being as a banker, I would imagine, I don't know this, that if I was in the money business, you see the world through money and an investment, just like as a pastor, I see the world through, people's engagement with God or not engagement with God, that kind of a thing. So I just wonder, you've been, 5 years in senior leadership at a bank, or more. What is being a bank executive, in this case a regional bank, tell you about the community? That is to say, where are we spending and investing our money? Did it surprise you? And maybe it's different under COVID. But I mean, do you say, "Oh, this is what I thought"? People have mortgages and college educations and occasionally buy a boat, or is there something now that you didn't know about how people spend their money?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, spending. There is a lot of personal wealth in this area. People are very financially stable. The economy is very financially stable. It's kind of just a very consistent community where many people are doing well. They're not doing extraordinarily well, but they are consistent, and their jobs are consistent. Their employment is consistent, and that's what I see a lot. And as far as spending, it's very specific. As a community bank manager, you do a lot of consumer-based lending, so you're
kitchens,
houses. You're part of their home renovation process.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be everything from their roof to adding a pool. Especially this year, everyone wanted a pool.
Interesting.
Everyone wanted a boat. So these were the type of transactions that I saw a lot of.
And that was a COVID thing, you think?
100%. 100%.
So people are not going on trips. They're not going on vacations. They're making a vacation here.
There was one thing you could do in New York State. You could take that boat and you could put it on a lake.
So what's so interesting about that is, again, the things you don't think about. If I was, Joe's Boat and Marina, and I just had a okay year every year in a city that is mostly, not summer months, I had a good year.
Oh, you love 2020.
So name just
you got
two or three or four off the top of your head like that of industries that the 2020 was a good year versus was even a better year than normal. So one of them would be boats.
Yeah, boats. Oh gosh, you put me on the spot now. Anything related to home improvement.
Oh, so Home Depot or whatever,
goodness,
or
yes.
The hardware store near my house.
All the hardware stores. If you're a supplier of those type of things, woodworking, anything related to
personal contracting, maybe.
Oh, I killed it.
Okay.
I mean, outside of the fact you weren't allowed in anyone's house for a couple months.
Well, that's true, right?
But yes, once that lifted. Busy beyond belief, I imagine. And again, pools was a huge thing. If you owned a pool company,
that's something.
You are probably booked out for a couple of years because there's still, fear and anxiety around when will things open up. So even if I can't get my pool in 2020, I want it in 2021 if there's still travel restrictions and things of that nature.
So this may be similar to the question I just asked, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What does being in the money business, if I can call what you do the money business, tell you about people? Okay, what new things do you know about people? You don't have to obviously say anybody's names, but you work with thousands of customers that you didn't know before you got into the banking business.
No, I'm glad you phrased it that way. I wouldn't say I'm a money guy. I am 100% a people guy, and I'm about investing in people and learning about their desires and matching money products, to those dreams and those desires for their life. So what did I find out? I found out that relationships are very complicated around money. I have a lot of conversations that are quote unquote in private, and could you not tell, my spouse, or, this isn't something I am telling anybody else, or,
interesting.
There's certainly a lot of caution and privacy related to people's personal finances. And I respect that, and I want to be a part of that privacy. And certainly the bank prides itself, and any bank prides itself on being extremely,
of course,
private. So but I still think it is interesting what is underneath the facade of social media and what you think of your neighbor next door, because you can appear very, very wealthy and very consistent, and maybe that person's probably very conservative with their money. And I could probably see a lot different picture when I actually look at the balance sheet and see what comes in and what goes out.
You make me wonder about the work that you do. I hear this from people, say, who are doctors or lawyers. Doctors and lawyers sometimes say to me, just because I'm a pastor, sometimes what I do is I get into the personal tears in my office. In other words, people tell their doctors the most private things, or they don't have any choice in some cases. And same with their lawyers. Is that true? I mean, do you find yourself at times, because people are talking about their money, that you're almost in a counseling session, or it's
it's very very transparent. The thing I joke about with my transition in the bank is I started as a teller. In a teller, obviously, you're out in the open lobby, and there's not as much privacy. But the moment I transitioned to a sales-related or sales-focused position, what we would call like an office position at the branch, once someone entered into that office, they gave you an incredible amount of respect, just your overall opinion about money and your ability to speak to them about their finances. It was like totally lifted. The things I would have said at the teller line, they would just be felt so disrespected, right? But they come into the office and I can say things and maybe be a little bit more forward with my approach, and it's received for whatever reason. And certainly they do open up in reverse about, yes, you're right, money does just lead to other conversations.
Right. So thinking about those listening to us, most people, I would think, in our community are not flush with. I mean, we're in a conservative community. There's a lot of people, as you say, that are doing well, not necessarily doing super duper well, and probably a lot of others that are, especially families, young families like even yourself, people who have, they're not living hand to mouth, but they're paying their mortgages, right? So what does it look like, in your advice as a banker, to survive financially during a pandemic? Let's just assume you and or your spouse kept your job, so you're not desperate. But are there different advice that you would give relative to either saving, spending, or even investing?
Sure. I think the thing I would say is you have to do all three of those things. You have to be willing to have a conversation about naming every single dollar that comes in for you. And that's even during these times of when the stimulus check hits the bank account. Is there a conversation around every penny that is spent there, or does it just kind of release the ease of that month's bills? I'm under the camp that everything should be extremely intentional when it's related to finances, and that begins with a good budget, which again is about identifying every single penny that's going to come in that month and being able to disperse it in a way that matches your individual beliefs, your beliefs as a unified couple, maybe even the beliefs of something greater than you and your spouse. So it should be reflected in that monthly budget. And so hopefully it is. And hopefully a part of that is saving for emergencies. I think the pandemic has certainly exposed that, is the inability to survive short-term loss in income. Even folks that were furloughed for short periods of time, a lot of people can't survive, just a 2-week stretch of no income because they have no savings.
Right.
So are we learning from that if that is, someone's story? And then certainly investing, you kind of teased it a little bit. The markets have done well. You wouldn't think there was a pandemic occurring, certainly. And that is just traditionally what the market has done forever. So it doesn't matter who the president is. It doesn't matter where the economy seems to be at. If you look at the totality of the market, you are going to see growth in the course of time and consistently pushing funds towards it. there'll just be fruit that comes from it.
Couple final questions. One, you've answered some, but you may have a last thought or additional thought. What are your greatest fears and best hopes, let's say, for your business in the 2021 year?
I love being called someone's banker. I enjoy having folks come into the office, maybe linger a little bit, have a cup of coffee in their hand, because kind of a calling card of our bank is, we have, good coffee in the lobby for you. And I truly miss that and fear that it will not return.
You mean in the sense of people just showing up?
Just showing up and lingering, and wanting to talk to their banker and desiring to have a personal relationship with someone in the financial field outside of maybe their trusted accountant or wealth advisor, but just wanting to have a relationship with a banker. So that's a fear for sure. But I do believe that I can flex. I've learned that as much as I may not personally love it, a video chat does help release a little bit of that awkwardness of only emailing somebody or only having a phone conversation. That just that little break of seeing somebody without a mask on,
right,
for that little period of time in a video screen is sufficient to give me some of that personal interaction. Other hopes is just that we are wiser, tougher people, and we realize that things shouldn't be just fluffed off, that life is a very serious thing, and finances and personal finance is a very serious thing for creating happiness, I think, and creating a structure that allows for personal growth. I think a lot of times personal growth that I see can't occur because the financial situation is in such disarray. So those are kind of some of the things I think about.
So I mentioned in the introduction that you're an elder at Browncroft. Some people might not even know what that is. I mean, most people perhaps listening to us do, but I mean, you serve as on the board of directors, if you want to say, of the church. So you're a man of faith. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder how your faith in your personal faith in Christ, your faith plays a role in your everyday life as a manager of a bank.
Yeah. So interesting. I contemplate this often. I started not in banking. I started in radio, and I loved being a sports broadcaster. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster since I was in my teen years. And when I entered into that field, I realized that it didn't match up with a lot of the beliefs that I was developing at that time, late teens, early 20s, early in my faith and desiring to learn more and grow in my relationship with Jesus. And it was hard. It rocked me pretty good. So I was, when I had that period of time, I joke it was my 7-year itch with my radio career. I didn't have a 7-year itch with my marriage, but I did with my marriage to sports radio. And I thought, what is this all about? What am I doing every day to impact people's lives? Does anyone really take anything I say all day long seriously? Where now this opportunity that's been given to me, that feels like a clear blessing from God, is an opportunity to make my words and my actions matter. The type of customers I strive towards engaging with and growing with are ones that in return believe in a community bank and believe that it matters that my money that I receive from my income is put in a bank that will then redisperse it to my neighbors, that it won't go to the big mothership corporate bank that has locations from Hong Kong to LA, that it's just an industry that matters where, your money goes, that even though you don't feel it, that money that sits there as you pay your bills and it's reflushed and you pay more bills is being used to buy your buddy's swimming pool that your kid swims at and has an opportunity to have relationship in his neighborhood. And I just feel a trickle-down effect to what I do. And I just try to never pass up an opportunity to have a conversation, a really meaningful conversation. So that's where I think about my faith on a day-to-day basis, is that, God believes in my ability to connect with people, and he gifted me with the ability to speak well and enjoy conversation. And I just try not to shy away from it. I even if it's a customer coming in that's having issues with their online banking, I suppose I don't need to take that customer as, the manager of the office. But if I don't have an appointment and I don't, my staff is preoccupied, why wouldn't I want that opportunity to meet somebody and have a conversation, and who knows where it'll go?
Right.
So long-winded way of saying that's how I try to tie my faith to what I do.
That's great. So one question I'd like to ask everyone that sits at this table is about books. And because it says a lot about somebody, in the sense, or I shouldn't say a lot, because it's unique, right? I might like to read, novels or self-help books or sports books or whatever. But also, so one, it tells me something about you or something about me. But it's also, back when you're talking about boats, I think one thing that many people are doing is more in this season is reading. So I'm interested to know if you can think of, maybe even in the last year, is there one book or two that you'd say you read that you thought could be about any subject?
Yep. I definitely, typically steer towards self-improvement books, I guess you would say, just because of the season of life I was in for many years previous to this, and leadership books have come into play very often as well. But I have the book I really enjoyed this year. I don't think it came out this year. I'm always a little slow on getting the hot new book. But Malcolm Gladwell is a very well-known author, I think, to many listening. And he made this book called Talking to Strangers. And I was intrigued just by the idea of, I always want to continue to be more and more comfortable talking to individuals that I have no connection to in my worldview. That, I was raised in a very conservative, strict home, so I feel like I have, an avenue to connecting with individuals in that space, but then was fortunate enough to get out of the house and move out of that area of New York State for a brief period, and then I spent time in the Midwest and, did other things through college to expose myself to different types of people. And what that book really highlights is how important it is how we acknowledge our preconceived notions of people, and how those opinions can be beneficial, or in kind of identifying things that aren't good or fulfilling, but also on the flip side, how those can be hurtful to how we, police people or how we interact with certain communities. And I found it just a very intriguing way to adjust my worldview.
Talking to strangers, that we said?
Talking to strangers.
And I know, of course, Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, but for others, that was his big
David
book.
and Goliath and
that's
things
right.
like that. Yep.
Something about dogs, isn't there one?
Yeah. What is that?
I forgot the name of it, Dog Ears or something. but is that a 2020 book?
No, maybe it's 2019.
Okay, good.
2020 is a blur.
I know. Right.
So.
Well, Harry, listen, thank you so much for taking us the time today, and look forward to seeing if some of your good predictions, your hopes are realized in the year that is. We're only in January. We've got a lot of time to go. Thank you, friends, for joining us today for this conversation. Look forward to continuing this conversation soon.